All right, we are live. How's it going, everyone? I got John here. I'm Zach. Um, just wanted to give you, before we get started, quick kind of intro in terms of what we're trying to accomplish today and what we want to share. So, obviously, we worked with John last year to create Giftology, and he is the exact type of person that is the reason why we started the company. Someone who's got a ton of valuable ideas to share. Everyone who meets him is excited and learns so much, but that's limited to the people he could meet or interact with directly. And so the reason we do all this is to help people like John go from idea through to published book. And that process isn't so difficult. It's made more difficult than it should be by the publishing industry and by our kind of conventions on how writing should be. And so what John and I wanted to do today was just spend some time talking through what those barriers are and how more people like him who have great ideas can get through them, create a great book like Giftology, and then leverage that book in order to sell copies and make an impact, and also grow your business and get speaking engagements and all the other results John has seen. So a bunch of you have sent in questions over the past week. What we're going to do is John's going to take over and provide some of his insight and ask me questions, and we'll go through some of those common ones. And once we've gone through those, we'll turn it over and do Q&A based on what we've talked about with any questions you've got that are specific to your situation or that come up from listening to this. So John, take it away.
Thanks, Zach. It's a huge honor to be able to have you on the call. I know you guys have written somewhere around or helped authors write 300 to 400 books just in the last couple of years. And so I consider it to be the best decision I made in 2016. That wasn't hyperbole. It was really, I talked about writing a book for 5 years, and even had some people are like, we're not inviting you back to our conference unless you have your book done, because we've been hearing about it for forever. When are you going to get it done? And so I remember talking to Rod and saying, gosh, like this writing thing seems really difficult. Like I'm not getting anywhere. And then we met through mastermind talks. And so I think there's probably a lot of misconceptions on who should write a book. I had probably 5 or 6 different reasons with legacy and wanting to provide more credibility and lead flow. But, in your experience of working with hundreds of authors, who really should write a book? What are the categories or the types of people?
Yeah. So the things that we do, so someone comes to us and says, hey, I'm interested in writing a book. We've got 2 qualifications for if we want to work with them. One is, do they know their stuff and have something valuable to say that readers will benefit from? So the easy framework to think about this is there some group of people out there that if you met one-on-one, you'd be able to sit across the table with them for 5-6 hours and help them go through and solve a problem that they're having, right? So in your case, it's very clear there are businesses that either aren't doing gifting at all or are doing it wrong. You know that you could sit down with an executive from one of those companies, walk them through everything that you know, and they'd walk away with a problem that they have solved. So that's number one. And one of the big problems that I see, not so much with people we work with, but a lot of much younger people talking about writing books, is they're trying to jump to all the credibility and benefits before they've done the core piece of really being an expert in what they know. And so that's one of the things we encourage, is like what we're good at is making it really easy once you already know your stuff. But that's the hard part, is being a real expert. And then number 2 is, what's the ROI for them, right? So if someone is coming to us, they've got a really valuable, great business idea, but they don't have or a great book idea, but they don't have a business that relates to it. They don't speak on the topic. They don't have an audience they're growing on the topic. It can still be an okay decision, but a book is a pretty big time and energy commitment, and it's not the best way to earn money directly from book sales, right? If they're trying to sell their information, Amen. Better to not slave away and create a perfect product that everyone thinks needs to be 100% polished that you sell for under $20. It's not a good business decision. Where it's good is if it leads to other opportunities. And so the other piece of what we drill into is, if this book was really successful, if it did what Giftology did and reached a lot of the right kinds of people and is really well known, how does that impact your life? And if it impacts you by just making you feel good and selling book sales, probably not worthwhile. If it means speaking engagements and business and other things that can really generate a return, coupled with a real value to the audience, that's when it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know how we calculated the ROI. and kind of, we laid out like, this is how many speaking engagements we need to land, and this is how many deals we need to land. But I know not everybody is structured the same way. And we were hoping it'd pay off in 12 months. For us, we were fortunate, even with the websites and marketing and everything, it paid off in 3 months, which kind of shocked us. But how do you typically coach people to think through? Because, $25,000 to write a book seems like a crazy number until you start to look at ghostwriters at $100,000 and even $10,000 for a ghostwriter, but nothing else is done for you. So how do you coach people through when you're talking through executives or sales reps or anybody that's thinking about writing a book? Yeah. How do you coach them through the ROI?
Right. So it's one of those things that's interesting. That's like, I never want us to be trying to help people like make up an ROI that makes sense for them, right? I've seen too many people in too many different businesses trying to say like, work on, if you were to do this one day, then it would pay for itself. The people that we work with and the ones who are really no-brainers for the book to exist are the ones where the systems are already set up to benefit from that, right? And the two big ones are the two that you hit on, clients and speaking, tend to be where the real immediate revenue returns are. And so what we encourage is just to think through mapping out kind of typical results. If you're already speaking, you can usually expect to somewhere around be able to double those prices for speaking engagements and have a tool to be able to book more gigs quite a lot more quickly. In terms of clients, it really depends how you plan to leverage it, right? Some people want to use a book in their sales funnel. Some people just want more like you, that a lot of people are going to hear about it and opportunities will just come out of the woodwork. So the challenge with the ROI discussion is that it's really hard to calculate in advance. Almost every author is similar to you. A year later, they're like, whatever math I did didn't really end up mapping to reality. I was pleasantly surprised, and the biggest benefit was something that I never would have guessed. It's a lot of serendipity. But what we're looking for is what's the worst case scenario case that we can build that still makes it worthwhile? And so in your case, that may have been, I'm going to increase my speaking fees from $7,500 to $15,000. I'm going to do 6 additional speeches, and we're going to sign one big client. If that happens, it wasn't a loss, and everything else is a benefit. We're often trying to think through that. What can we do that will double people's money as a worst case scenario, and then let the serendipity be the bonus on top of that? Yeah.
So as far as, I think there's a misconception on how much you can make on a per book basis after you take into, like we spent triple on our printing costs, and, there's warehousing, there's all these different things. Like, I think it'd be helpful for people to understand if your book costs, let's say $20 or $25, like, how many books should they expect to sell in the launch, and then over the course of time, and how much you actually make on a book when you do sell one.
Yeah. So the big difference there is traditionally published versus something like us or self-publishing where you own all the rights and royalties. So if you're traditionally published, you'll usually make a 12.5% royalty after their cost. So you're looking at like $1 a book is loosely what traditionally published authors make. If you're selling it yourself, for ebooks, you get 70% of whatever the cost is. So Amazon, it's on Amazon, it's $9.99. They sell a copy, you get $6.99. It's really clean and simple. For physical books, basically the way the formula works is that Amazon takes 40%, and then you pay the cost of printing the book, and you get what's left. So if someone's doing print-on-demand printing is the simplest version, the book's $19.99, Amazon takes $8, the printer takes $3, and they're left with $9. That's kind of a good best case scenario. If they're printing a big print run and fulfilling it, and the shipping and warehousing costs and stuff add in, it gets a little bit more complicated. But usually what we're seeing is that authors will end up making $5 to $8 a copy net after all of that's included.
Yeah, which is still, 5 to 8 times more than going through. That not only owning the IP and being able to gift copies, like which obviously fits for our book. I think in general it fits for most people's book to control the IP. It's amazing how many people get their ego caught up into, I want to be published with Wiley or whatever else. They don't realize when we started to research it, even just the haircut you take on. I don't even consider it a self-published book. It's just, do you want to own the IP or do you not?
Right.
Everything people look. They actually, I had somebody, Glazier, Dan Kennedy, who's been book published a long time. His president was like, "This is one of the nicest books I've seen come across my desk." We didn't send it to him; somebody else sent it to him. And so I think there's a misnomer that you're gonna make more money on the per book basis, but you're going to it's not going to look as nice. And obviously you can print a cheap, crappy looking book no matter where you publish through. But in general, it's amazing the money difference, at least for me.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting there, like the flexibility for someone like you to be able to give away copies. I mean, for a lot of people, they think of owning the rights as more dollars per book, and that's nice. But the biggest difference we see with entrepreneurs is like the fact that you can decide tomorrow that you're giving a speech and you want to give away 400 copies, and it only costs you the cost of printing those books instead of needing to go back to the publisher and buy them for $10.50 a copy or whatever they would charge. That's one of the bigger positives that we see. Yeah,
I have friends that are authors that it's a nightmare to get anytime they want to, do anything from a large event perspective, that they just can't do it. They can't afford to. And we've been fortunate to sell most of our books at the events and not actually give them away. But there are times when we want to send out after, speaking at MIT or whatever else, we want to send 75 copies. Well, it's a lot. Even our VIP version was cheaper than going through and buying through a traditional publisher. So, so I know I set aside a lot of time to write the book. I ended up not needing as much time as I thought. I think going into it, like even my business partner, Rod, was like, do we have the time set aside for this? I'm busy. I got 3 kids. We got multiple businesses. Like, how should I, if I'm, one of my clients here that's listening or a friend, from a timing perspective, like how should I prepare to write the book, set aside time-wise? What does that look like?
So what's interesting, and this is a lot of the part of the ROI discussion that we'll walk through on calls with people, is the part one is trying to think of what's the upside, right? The kind of process we talked through and being clear, what do I have to gain from this? Now you're looking at the cost, and the cost is both time and money. So if people are writing it totally on their own, the typical author takes about 1,000 hours to write a book. But I think that's because of a whole bunch of inefficiencies. It's not like we save them from 1,000 hours all the way down. I think there's a lot of time that's wasted with the normal process of sitting there and writing, and then you end up with a draft that's wrong and revising. And so following our process, but doing it on your own, and we can link somewhere in here and send in the follow-up email a link to download our book for free, which is just, here's exactly what we do step by step.
You guys give away the whole recipe. I thought I did with Giftology, but you guys do it at a silly level. Like, here's the entire roadmap. Go do it yourself, and don't pay us any money. Yeah, and for some people, I think there are things that are unavoidable, right? You're going to have costs of laying out the interior, and you're going to need time project managing it. For the types of people who we tend to work with, even with all the information there, it just pays to have professionals helping you. But the whole process is there. Following that, the numbers that we've gotten is that it takes about 200 hours, start to finish, to write and publish it. With people working with us directly, usually that's closer to about 30 hours. So there's big time savings there, but then there's the additional cost. So roughly, when we do the math, if you have the positive ROI of that one of these options is worthwhile, if you value your time more than $110 an hour, then it makes sense to hire us. If you value your time less than that, then you can just put in the time instead, and ends up being more inexpensive to just follow the process on your own. Yeah. Well, I'll say, I think we probably could have done it on our own, and whether my time's worth more than $110 or not, I still think that the book turned out better as a result of having somebody that actually understood how to structure things and ask good questions and edited. And so I don't think you guys give yourself enough credit, honestly, on this side. We brought some people to the table to help polish certain things, because I think even 250 books ago, you guys were still working out some of the kinks. And I still feel like, dollar for dollar, there's no question that we got a better book as a result of it. And that's not hot air. Like, I've said that on probably 100 podcast interviews, because it's how I feel. And even Rod, my business partner, who's I'm the optimist, he's the realist. He would say the same thing. So let's go into the actual writing process, because I think that's where the rubber meets the road, at least for me. Like, I was nervous. I was curious if I had enough information to actually fill up the pages. I was like, I've been doing this for 17 years and I'm still scared. So you can only imagine if somebody's been doing something for 5 years or, whatever else. I feel like talking is, filling up pages with words is not difficult, but I still was curious, does it have any meat to it? So, walk us through the process of getting good thoughts onto paper for, when they're, starting the writing process.
Yeah. So it's interesting. The people who have that fear, as interesting aside, who are like, oh, I'm not sure if I quite have enough to say, are normally the ones who it ends up not being a problem at all. Especially people, especially people who have done what they do for 5 years or more and still have that fear. It's one of two things. It's like incredible kind of humbleness of thinking like, oh, I don't know that much. And it's all of those assumptions of things that you think are obvious, but once you start digging into, realize that readers really need, that end up filling out a lot more. Because I imagine when you started, you're like, oh, the gifting stuff's easy. I could explain it in 3 pages. But once a normal person who doesn't have your instincts needs to come into it, then all of a sudden there needs to be a lot more detail. So what the process is that we think through is the challenge with book writing in general is that a lot of people sit down. First thing they do is they start writing. Right? They'll block 2 hours every morning. They'll write every day.
Isn't that what everybody says?
Right. They'll finally finish enough words that they say, great, I did it. And now they've got a book that they don't know who it appeals to, that doesn't fit together, that doesn't have a clear message, and that's missing all of these core foundational pieces. And what makes writing a book take 1,000 hours instead of 200 is the revising and fixing at that point has to happen with 40, 50,000 words of text, which is a lot harder than doing it with just ideas. So what we do is we flip it and we start with getting the foundation as solid as possible before we build anything on top. And so this is the advice that I give to anyone writing a book on their own, is to start off, not rush into things, and really focus on knowing with 100% certainty, what is this book about? Who is it for? What are they trying to get out of it? And how will they talk about the book once they read it? And once that's clear, on top of that, building the foundation of, okay, if that's the goal for that audience, what exactly do they need to know to get there? And building an outline like the one that we did together of, okay, we need to hit these 9 major points for 9 chapters. And within each of those 9 chapters, we need to tell this exact story, make this point, express this idea, tell this other story, give this example. And it can feel frustrating. I was just talking to an entrepreneur who's in the middle of writing a book right before this call. And he was saying, it's good enough, right? We're used to it's at 90%. We can move on and fix it on the way. But the truth is with books, like that every hour you spend making the outline better is going to save you 30 hours at the end, because it's a lot easier to play with the ideas when they're in their purest form of an outline as opposed to blocks of text that you need to digest and move around. So we really overinvest in that structuring and outlining process up front. And the way we recommend people do that is to start with that value proposition and imagine that you're sitting across the table from that perfect, ideal candidate person who needs to read your book. And they say, I have the problem that your book solves. What are the steps I need to go through to not have that problem anymore? And you may start off, and this is mostly for like how-to books. It would be slightly different for memoirs. But in order to have that problem, first you need to understand these ideas. And how would you explain that? Then they need to take this action. And how would they do that? And really just going through the phases that you would walk a human through step by step, and trying to catch the mistakes they would make, the gaps they would have, the things they would need understood, and predict all those problems they'll have, because ultimately what you're trying to do is put all the ideas in one package so that you can have that conversation at scale.
Yep. No, I think Ian Altman, who has written a number of books, Same Side Selling, he just spoke at our EO chapter, and he talked about the most popular page on his website that people go to is, what problems do I solve? And I never really thought about that, but that, he's like, the Google teaches us to type in, like, how do I fix a broken this? Like when we search now, we're searching based upon a problem. And I think that I didn't realize as I was going through the outline process with you guys, but I think that that's probably the most important. I mean, it's more important than the interview process and whatever else. Like, that's just kind of somebody asking the question, and obviously they can probe and whatever else. But I didn't realize when I did it how important the outline was and how good we had a really solid outline. But if I was to go back and do it again, I'd probably spend even a few more hours on the outline side of things, mapping out like what pisses people off about gifting, or not even about gifting, like what pisses them off about referrals, or what pisses them off about, like, because at the end of the day, they don't care about gifting.
Yeah.
Most of the time they care about like, they're not getting the referrals they deserve. And I think that the problem you solve, and that really makes people angry, like when you come to them and say, hey, I got the solution to that problem that's been nagging you for the last 6 years. If I was to do something different, the outlining process is probably one of the things I would do differently. Kind of along that lines. I mean, I wish I'd hired a researcher earlier. Like, what are the lessons or the pitfalls that are, whether they work with you or whether they do it on their own, what are the biggest challenges or things that people, if they went back and wrote the book a second time, or when they're, like a Cameron Harold coming back and writing another book with you, what do they wish that they had done differently?
Yeah. So I'll jump back for 1 second, because I think the problem piece is a really interesting one. It's both incredibly valuable in order to frame the book to yourself properly, to write the right things. It's also the most important way to generate word of mouth, right? Like at this point, your book is selling every day to people who you didn't market it to. It's just that people are reading it and talking about it. And there's two ways for word of mouth to happen. It can happen because you're Malcolm Gladwell and you write something that people read and it makes them feel interesting and good to talk about it and share it. And what that looks like is like they read it, it's not me. They tell about it every day, and then a month later they don't talk about it anymore. And instead with giftology, or using Cameron as an example with Meeting Suck, I didn't finish reading Meeting Suck and say, I need to tell 100 people about this. But every month for the 1.5 years since I've read it, I've told 2 people about it, because it's solving a specific problem, right? And I think if your book can acutely enough solve a problem that comes up in conversation, then people have a way to talk about it with word of mouth. And that's what leads to the long-term sale. So framing it around the question that you want the book to come up in conversation as a solution to is like the number one thing from a framing perspective that'll allow you to point everything else in the right direction. And I think you kind of did this intuitively. If you have a business, it often happens automatically because you've already framed your business around solving that problem, and the book aligns with that. But for people who are writing about a topic separate from their business, or who have a few different ideas, making sure that when someone reads this, how does it turns them into an advocate for the book? What situations will they be an advocate in that they'll remember the book a year later, as opposed to just talk about it the day they finished it?
Yeah. What's the trigger? Right? What's the pain point that people are like, I wish I could do this, or I hate when this happens, but if I was to do it all over again, I would be even more intentional about saying like, weaving the emotion of like, gifting's great. And, what's funny is gifting's not even my love language. I get the words of affirmation back. Like that's my love language, but I would be way more intentional on the outline side of writing to solve the problem. Is there any other things, lessons learned where you're like, for 400 books, here's the things that people, say they wish they had done differently or better, or if they could go back again? Yeah.
So especially for people doing it on their own, we recently did we had a little group of 30 or so people who wanted to write books that we, for free, just said, we'll walk you through our process to see if you have any issues and see if you're able to do it just based on our advice. And that we know the places where authors have challenges, that we know we need to spend extra attention. What we didn't realize is there's a lot of places that when people do it on their own, they have trouble that they don't if they're working with us. So one of those examples is the clarity up front. Like if you're doing this on your own, get to the point where you feel like you have answers to those questions, and then get your harshest friend to drill into you and ask you why 100 times, because we never seem to have issues there. We have someone on the phone walking through that goal with you, but everyone working on it on their own would make excuses and end up allowing themselves to write a book that didn't have a clear audience and a clear purpose and a clear message. So really having someone support there. The other thing that people tend to have issues with when they're on their own is they'll finish the outline and they won't start the interviews. So the way that the process works for those of you watching, once that outline is done, you could just sit down and write based on that. But obviously then there's all the normal issues of writer's block and challenges along those lines. And so what we do instead is we get you on the phone and we talk through that whole outline. And because we've got everything so structured, it's not an interview that is, hey, tell me about your ideas. Oh, great, teach me some more. It's chapter 1 starts with this idea. Teach it to me. I'll ask follow-up questions. Now tell this story. Great. Give me more details. And I go through the whole outline so that you have spoken your whole book in your own words from start to finish. And then we're able to describe that and work from it. And so what we find is that when people are doing it on their own and they're not scheduling interview calls with someone who they have an obligation to, they will put off starting that phase forever. I was just sitting with Jason Gaignard, and he was saying that exact situation. He has an amazing outline. He knows everything he wants to say, and that one piece of getting started there has been what has puts him off, because it's a little bit of the fear of that maybe the outline's not quite right, and there's just no accountability. It feels awkward to sit in a room with a microphone by yourself. So for everyone doing it on their own, I recommend having a friend or hiring someone just to sit with you and schedule those calls to make sure you don't get hung up there. And then the third one is underestimating how much they need to focus on marketing. Like a book it's not like you write a book and all of a sudden everything in your life just works out perfectly and everyone loves it. There is work that needs to be done. Right. So it's like you did an amazing job of this, and like now we're a year after the book comes out and hundreds of people are finding out about it without you having to do anything because of all the word of mouth. Like that happens later. But at the start, you needed to hustle and make sure that those first 1,000 or 2,000 readers found the book and loved it and started talking about it. And I think too many authors, it's hard to write a book. You finish and you feel like someone should be patting you on the back. You shouldn't be working harder, but that first sprint and making sure that the base of fans and the reviews on Amazon and the initial press is all there to let the cycle start is really important.
Yeah. No, I think fortunate to have a good friend and mentor in Hal Elrod, and his book was an overnight success after 6 years. And so I think between him and Tucker and a number of other people, I'm like, I'm just going to treat this like a 5-year marathon. Yeah. So I'm 20% through. And I would agree. I think that I see a lot of people, even big name authors, it seems like their book has this huge spike for the first 3 months. And then it's no wonder that they write a book every 12 to 18 months. They have to. Yeah. But I very rarely see somebody like roll up their sleeves and say like, I'm going to treat this like, it's even a 2-year marathon, let alone a 5-year.
Yeah. So there's an interesting parallel people use. They talk about brick books versus feather books. So like you can market it and push a book up, but if it's a really good book that people are going to talk about and spread, then maybe those sales will float down slowly. If it's a book that people aren't enjoying or doesn't really solve a problem and where people don't care to talk about, you'll get all those sales, and then it's just going to drop right down. And the best case scenarios are someone like Hal, where you push it up like this, and it's like an anti-gravity book. It goes up every month because more and more people are talking about it.
It's like a freaking helium balloon.
Right, exactly.
I mean, the guy's, struggling for his life right now with cancer, and it's still like the book is, fortunately he's able to take time off with his family, and it just keeps growing because of, he's has so much. And I would say his book kind of created a movement and is kind of unique. I don't know that every single his book is that way or has his personality, but he's been really fortunate in that regard. So, we're talking about, people being able to do it on their own, not just working with you. So the self-publishing, is there anything else around the self-publishing part of laying out kind of the plan so that can you kind of distill down some of the other pieces of if they're going to download the PDF and go run with it themselves?
Yeah. So on the publishing side, I think the big thing is people tend to get overwhelmed and think that it's complicated. I have a weird parallel with this. I always used to really overestimate what a big deal skiing was. I don't know why. I would always just think like friends wanted to go ski. I'm like, oh, it's like a whole thing. I don't really know how it works. You like go to the top of a mountain. Do you rent gear? Where do you get the gear? Go down. Like I think there's a lift ticket. Like it just felt overwhelming. And then it was
too
actually
many moving parts.
And it's not like I couldn't figure it out. I just never tried to. I never like thought about it for a moment. And when we were at YEC, I was actually like, oh, we're at the top of a mountain. Someone gives me skis. I go down and then I go back up. Like why did I think that this was complicated? And it's exactly what I see people do with publishing, where it's not actually hard. It's just a series of pretty simple steps, but there's this general confusion built around it where people feel overwhelmed. And so the book runs them through it, but it's all publishing is having a cover design, having a layout design, having an ebook, buying an ISBN, and then getting it live on Amazon. Like and having the publishing assets and all those things, there's a range and they're not simple, but it's just following steps. And so my recommendation for people is, first of all, just to not be overwhelmed, just go through it. It's not, you'll get through it. And number two, just to not be cheap. Like the reason that self-publishing can have a bad name is because it gives people it's not because there's any negative. You can hire the same people who work on any traditionally published book it's because a lot of people will be cheap when they self-publish, and therefore it kind of tarnishes the reputation. But if you want a book that it looks and feels amazing and professional, it's not that expensive. To give you rough ideas, like world-class best cover designers are $1,500 a cover, and those are the people who are like top of their game. To get a layout done is a little bit complicated, but you can get an amazing one for $1,500 and often do a decent one a little bit cheaper. And buying an ISBN is $100, and the rest of it is just following instructions, getting a professional headshot taken, and so you can be all in $4,000 and have a book that is designed by the top people in the world. And I recommend, if you're going to spend all the time and effort to create a book, it's worth doing that versus trying to get by for $1,000 or $1,500, but people feeling like it's an amateur end product, even though the information might be great.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the overwhelming part, like I fell into that category. I mean, I think it's becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of, you think it's complicated, so you just avoid the pain. And like, it's even like setting up an LLC, like you can do it on LegalZoom or whatever else for like $50 or $100, and people make it out like, oh, I'm going to start a business. Like, oh, it's like, it takes 5 minutes. And to your point, like, I'm so glad I didn't go cheap on the cover design and the materials. All of that stuff has made my book stand out head and shoulders, whether I went with you or somebody else. Like, people do judge a book by its cover, period. And it better be good stuff on the inside. It can't be blank pages, but the perception of what it is based upon how it's laid out. I've had people compliment the font choice and stuff like that I really didn't know what I was doing. I was like, it looks good to me. Yeah. But I'm glad that, we had somebody that knew what the heck they were doing on that side. But $1,500, people waste $1,500 on dumb stuff in their business every day, even small companies. I know we do. So it's like a nothing charge, really, relative to the whole scope of things.
And the interesting thing with books as a layout, especially the design side, is that there's a temptation to be like, oh, I can do something clever or something different. Maybe I'll try a cool, different font size or all these things. With books, different is just perceived as amateur. Like there are ways that you can do different. Like you getting a high quality leather cover, that no one's thinking that looks amateur. But we've seen people be like, oh, maybe I should put no title on the cover, or maybe I should have the back be made of a different material, or maybe I should do a different font. People are judging a book by if it looks professional, not if it looks cool. And so for most people, it's like hire the pros who do all the books you find in a bookstore, and it's going to look like all the books in a bookstore, but with your spin on it. And that's generally the way to kind of stand out positively, as opposed to stand out, but people just judge it as like, why'd you do that?
Yeah, it's like a tchotchke. It's like it's a gimmick. I'm sure. I mean, Seth Godin's a perfect example of somebody that's pulled off some of the gimmicky, crazy stuff. I mean, but he, they'll sell a book for $100 or $200 because it's like a coffee table book, and so everybody points to the one anomaly where it has worked on a guy that's written 20 books versus saying like, how do I take whatever's good about everything and just like go, to the nth degree. I think that's what we were fortunate to do, because we had some of those crazy thoughts of no title and my name like the size of like the Empire State Building on the book, but and remember Tucker being like, dude, you're not Bono, like nobody's gonna know Ruhlin, like don't have ego, put John Ruhlin so people know it's a real person, and so it was funny to get some of the pushback on that, on the title. Can you talk a little bit about titles and some of those sorts of like that was one of the biggest struggles for us, and we even fought you guys as the expert, and I'm so glad, like that's one thing that I feel like has made a big difference. Any of those things like the title that play a big role?
So what you want in the title is that it ideally makes the idea like clear and compelling, and it's easy to talk about. So there's a lot of different ways to accomplish that, right? There's like simple ones, there's ones that are clever, there's inventing kind of a new word like you did, but that it's clear what it means. And generally the best way to do it is it's really like a gut feel kind of thing. You will often know the right one when it comes up. And so what we recommend, we have a process in a blog post on our site. If you Google how to title a book, will be the first result. And the process is, here are 20 different ways to come up with titles, either model other books or come up with ideas or switch the word orders or all these things. And do that over and over. And so I think with you, we had a list together of 50 or 60 book title ideas. And a lot of them were garbage, but that's fine. We're just trying to get everything out, right?
Hurts my ego.
How?
No, they were.
The whole point is that a lot of them should be garbage, right? And then slowly from that list, you eventually start to hit on things. It's similar to headlines for articles or other things. You want to turn off the filtering and dump out every idea you can, and then refine from there. And the great thing with a title, I mean, I love giftology, and I pushed very hard. I know you remember to do that, because it was the kind of thing that could define what we were talking about so clearly. And we found in our company, we started using the word giftology before John had agreed that it was the title. We're like, oh, we got to do some giftology. And if you chose a different title, we still would have been saying it. And that's the power of a great title, is it becomes the term that's used to talk about what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was one of the key, like one of those, like, could have went either way, and I almost went the other direction. And then after bouncing off a few other people that I respected that really had no skin in the game, that didn't even know me, I mean, it became clear, and the title matters. People don't. They spend all this time on, inside the book, the pages that people may never even get to. But, it's like, I see these titles and I'm like, hey, that's horrible. Like that's no creativity, no anything. Yeah. So from a publishing perspective, if you're tossing, maybe you have the resources, revenue, notoriety to go traditional publishing. I've already kind of knocked the whole thing because I'm biased. I understand, like, because I went the other direction, but I still, to this day, like Jeffrey Gitomer and other people are like, man, I got an agent. You can go shop this. You'll get an advance. You'll republish under, a real publisher, all these other things. Like that can become pretty enticing. I think, whether it's ego or just credibility or whatever else, like what is there a checklist from you should self-publish versus traditionally publish?
Yeah. So, I mean, first filter is, can you traditionally publish, right? So for some portion of people, you need an audience, you need an idea that has a kind of mainstream compelling potential. So a lot of the best books that we publish are very niche, that publishers, they're like VCs. They want a chance of a home run, not a sure thing for a single. But assuming that that's a possibility for you, the trade-off is to traditionally publish. The positives, you're going to get an advance, so cash up front instead of spending money on the book.
What kind of range?
The common things for like business owners who are really like pro and impressive, 100 to 200 grand seems to be like the sweet spot these days. If you're like a big time celebrity, like the Obamas just got the biggest advance in history, 40 million for 2 books. The biggest ever before that was only like 11, so they were a huge level up. But yeah, I'd say typically you're looking for like, they tend to not go too far below 100,000 because the rest of the math doesn't quite make sense. But I'd say 100,000 to, like, in a really good situation, 250,000. So the positive is that upfront, getting bookstore distribution, purportedly getting help with some media, although they usually don't do much, but for some authors, they're able to get a few big media hits. And whatever credibility there is, which I have not found a big difference in any authors that I've worked with who have gone both directions in terms of securing media or anything else, but there's some benefit of being able to say you're published by Simon & Schuster or HarperCollins. And then the biggest one, truthfully, for most people is the ego side. Like there's something nice about,
nobody admits that though.
Right. No one admits it, but there is something nice about being chosen, and like it's the same way people feel when they raise money, right? It's like someone else believes in this, and now I'm like over a hump. Whereas when you're working on your own, there's no hump to get over until you're already there. So there's a nice stepping stone there that motivates people. On the downside, or like the positives of self-publishing, so positives are you own all the rights and royalties, so more revenue per book, ability to give away books, faster speed to market. So working with you, we were, I guess, like 6 months. 5 months, yeah.
I'd say 5. It was done in 5. If I would have gotten my act together on a few things, it would have been.
So 5 or 6 months start to finish, instead of with a publisher probably 18 to 24 months. And then creative control is a huge one. Like for a lot of authors, everyone ends up with fights with their publisher about cover design, title choice, editing, marketing rights, all of these things. And so the ability to just have it be something that you own and you can make your own decisions with is appealing. So I'd say it's mainly control, more revenue, ability to give things away, speed to market, and not needing to go through the process of being chosen and see if you get in, versus bookstore distribution, a little bit of PR, credibility, and advance upfront.
Yeah, you get in bookstores when 90% of books are sold on Amazon. It's like an interesting, even.
And you get in bookstores just for a burst. I mean, the truth is, for most books, the way the bookstore industry is weird. When we publish a book, it's stocked in the way that bookstores could order it if they wanted to. But they don't want to. The way those industries work is that they send out sales teams to convince the individual stores to stock the book. And so you need a sales team in order to do that. And so what publishers are doing is, like, a new book comes out, they're sending the team, they're getting it placed as much as possible. If it's not selling in those stores, they're just ditching it a month or 2 months later.
It gets sent back and it takes away from your royalty. Yeah, it's amazing. Like, and even $100,000 to $200,000 sounds like a lot of money until you go. A lot of the guys go hire ghostwriters and whatever else, and like I have a friend who I think he got $300,000 or $400,000, and all of it. By the time he did the New York Times campaign and all the different things, like he lost, like he spent more than what his advance was. Yeah. He didn't have control. Now he wants to charge. Now he makes $1 a book. Now his justification was, I want to charge $50,000 for a keynote, and Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 event planners want cover, and they want a mainstream publisher and New York Times #1, blah, blah, blah. And I still think to this day, like, if he had to do it all over again, I think he would probably win a different direction. Now, he ended up selling 40,000 books and doing amazing, but all the hassle and challenges and everything that he went through, I don't know that he would go down that path. And it seems like, I'm shocked how many entrepreneurs who are control freaks in every other part of their business and wanting freedom, for whatever reason, like, there's this aura around the traditional publishing, like they're blessing the thought and the idea. Now it's not everybody, but gosh, it's amazing to me that how many people, like friends of mine, are like, yeah, we're going traditional, and here's why. And I'm like,
yeah. And there are reasons, right? Like, I think, like, trying to hit New York Times is a good example of, like, you fundamentally need to be through a big 6 publisher to do that. And so there's reasons, like, if he says, my only goal for this book is to be able to put New York Times bestselling author in front of my name because it increases my speaking fees, all the power to him. Like, it's a whole process where he's getting the $400,000 and he's spending it and he's writing in order to have those words. It totally makes sense. But often what I find is it's a justification for that. They want to be chosen by someone else and feel like that's important.
Yeah. Well, in one of my other buddies, Shep Peiken, who I think you just talked to, I mean, he's written 4 or 5, I think 4 New York Times best-selling books and all these other things. But one of his books, people will still say New York Times, even though it's Wall Street Journal. And it's amazing how, like, people will confuse whatever the bestseller list is. Like, it's a very small minority of people that will determine, oh, you're New York Times versus Wall Street Journal versus USA Today. Like, they interchange all of them because it's like, if you're in one of those buckets or categories, or even, like, I see people are like, oh, you're an Amazon bestseller. And because of, Amazon just paid $13 billion in cash today for Whole Foods. Yeah. Like, it's almost like Amazon starting to encroach on, creating like a halo effect. And when it used to be like, oh, you're an Amazon bestseller, at least for me, I was like, oh, that's cute. Whereas Amazon carries more weight in 2017 than it did 5 years ago.
Yeah. And all of it comes back to just being that super clarity on what your goals are, right? Because if your goal is only having New York Times bestseller, then that makes sense. If your goal is, oh, it would be nice to be able to say bestseller, well, great, then you can go the Amazon route, do that easily, not sacrifice other goals, and still own your rights and do other things. So it really is, it's a lot more kind of, all of it comes back to starting with the end in mind and being able to think about what you want at the end and build the book and the plan and the marketing all towards that over the course of the process.
Yep. So let's switch gears. You mentioned marketing, and this is an area that I love the game and of opening doors and getting access to people. And I like experts, and we surround ourselves with as many people on the marketing side, even if I can do it. Like, other people are better and faster at it. What's from a business person's perspective, what are the ways to leverage a book from a marketing perspective? And as a follow-up, what are the things that you should be doing or tools you should be leveraging to make sure that you're marketing your book effectively?
Yeah. Awesome. So this is the thing that we see so many authors not do as much as they should. And loosely, the way I would think of it is that I'd step back from the book entirely and think about that overall as a business owner. There are 4 buckets that someone could see you in. They could say, who are you? I don't care to talk to you. they could say, I have no idea who you are, but you sound impressive. Say, oh, I've heard of you. I kind of know what you're about, or I'm a fan of what you do. And in almost every way, the purpose of a book is to move people across that spectrum. So the easy, low-hanging fruit is just writing a book at all will make more people go from saying, who are you, to you sound impressive, right? Hitting a bestseller list. All of these things aren't things that bring new opportunities. They're things that will impress people when you're already face-to-face with an opportunity. I think that's the like one end of the spectrum, right? That's when people are like, oh, the book's just a business card. You don't have to write a good book. It's just having it makes that switch, which is kind of crazy. I kind of hate it. But we're going from that second bucket to the third and the fourth is where the real value of a high quality book is. Because when you think about marketing for a book, you are using it to then create attention so that more people say, oh yeah, I've heard of you. And then the book is an easy tool for people who have heard of you to develop enough of an understanding and enough trust and relationship that they become a fan. And then more importantly, it's a way for those fans to talk about you to other people in order to continue that cycle and move more people across. And so when we think about book marketing, you're a perfect example of this. You, the first few months, spend a ton of attention and time and speaking and all these things to make people hear about you and know about giftology at all. If the value of that was only in their immediate book sales or even their immediate turning into clients, it would be worth it, but it was okay. The value comes that all of those people who you had hear about you now decide to buy the book. I'd say books and speaking are two of the fastest ways to make someone go from I heard of you to I'm a fan who's willing to talk about you, right? You read a blog post, you're like, oh, you meet someone briefly, maybe they impress you. But a book or a speech are the ways that people say, oh, like you're someone who I would recommend and trust very quickly. So you're working to get all that attention. The book is immediately a tool that you get talked about in Forbes. You have a huge profile in Forbes. Now those people who are reading that can read giftology. They're John Ruhlin fans. And then most importantly, they read it. We've talked about making it easy to talk about and generating word of mouth. Now they're bringing it up to their friends and they're pulling more people across from the I've never heard of you to I'm a fan, but because they're recommending the book, gifting the book, and all of these things. And so the way I think of book marketing for business owners is there's this cycle of people going from not hearing about you to hearing about you to buying the book to telling others about the book. And your job in all the media and attention that you're getting is to get that flywheel spinning by getting attention with the right people early on so that that cycle can start. And that's why the big investment in press that probably doesn't seem like it has an ROI in the short term is worth it early on, like what you've done, because the content marketing, the general media attention, being on podcasts, speaking, all of these things are building up that fan base who talk about the book so that cycle continues. Yeah.
It's amazing to me that even clients that I've had for 10 years that I would have said they're raving John Ruhlin fans, I offered to come speak at their conference for free like 5 years ago, and they never took me up on it. And I mean, they would spend a lot of money with me. I just wanted to add value and build the relationship and just get more entrenched. And as soon as the book came out, they read the book. They started quoting things back to me like it was the first time I had ever said it. Right. Like, oh, I really love that personalization part. And I'm like, you seriously? That's the first time I've said that no less than 100 times in the 10 years that I've known you. And now, like, we're talking about speaking at their event, and I'm like, my speaking fee's $20,000, and they're like, oh, well, we're not sure if we can afford you now. And I'm like, you guys, I'll cut you a deal. You've been with me for forever and invested in me, but they don't want me for free. They read the book, and now they are willing to spend significant amount of money to bring me in to come, and a lot of what I'm teaching is the same thing. So it's amazing it really flips a switch in people's heads and how they perceive you, even people that you have relationships with. And that really shocked me. And the other thing that I'll say, a couple more things. One is that I'm more referable. Like now all of a sudden it's like, hey, you want to talk to this knife guy? He says gifts and like they don't know what to say. Now they're just like, hey, you want to talk to this guy? Like he can help you with referrals. Yeah. He wrote the book on gifting. You probably should talk to him. And I'm like now all of a sudden they have the confidence, and it's like that one liner of like, he wrote the book on gifting and how to use it to drive your business. And that confidence of even people that I've known for 5, 10, 15, 20 years from a marketing perspective, like everybody wants to be more referable.
Yeah.
And so I was shocked on that.
Yeah. It's crazy to me. And I see this, I mean, even with myself, the number of people who like have a book that they've had a clear enough value proposition that I've absorbed it and I haven't even read it. And the topic comes up in conversation and I'm like, I don't know if this book's good, but I've heard good things about it and it solves the problem you're talking about. There's nothing else that a random, the example is that came up recently is the book The Coaching Habit by the guy who runs the consulting firm Box of Crayons. There's nothing he could do running a consulting firm that would make me go out and start talking to him as someone who's never met him, never spoken to him, never read anything he's written. But I hear about the book, it comes up over and over. It's a problem someone specifically has. All of a sudden now I'm out evangelizing him as someone who has no idea because he's given me this tool and package that makes me feel like I'm able to provide value to people just by recommending him. Whereas that just doesn't happen with other forms of media.
It's like this little, it makes it so easy to, it's like the ease of pulling out your credit card, like to swipe. It's like, it's so easy. Like it's compact. It's crazy. Do you want to talk at all about, at least for me, like, we hired certain experts to help on the marketing of the book. Interview Valet comes to mind. They help with the podcast interviews, which, people that are well connected might be able to get the podcast anyway. But I do think that for somebody that doesn't have the time, they're super helpful, or like influencing companies help with the article writing, and Smith Publicity helped us get the Fox News thing. So there's people that have been good resources for us that we've kind of outsourced some of those things to. Is there anybody that I know you guys offer some marketing as well, although you'll say like your core is the book, writing a freaking amazing book. What are some of the other things that people should be thinking about and doing, whether it's with you or on their own from a marketing perspective? Yeah.
So a lot of it depends on what their goals are, right? And this is why I think book marketing as a thing is kind of challenging, because it's not book marketing. It's using the book as a tool, and what people want to use it as a tool for is very different. So there's the people who do like New York Times bestseller campaigns, totally different than like an Influence & Co. that's a slow, steady burn. And so what I would say is there's really two overall paths you would possibly want to go down. One is, how do I get as much attention as possible in a short period of time directly surrounding the book in a way that's going to lead to book sales? So that's like, how do I get that flywheel turning of readers and referrals quickly? We offer a service that does this, and I'd say like Smith Public, it depends on who your audience is, right? For us, if you're the kind of person who the people who will read your book are more likely to be reading online media, blogs, those kinds of things, that's where we're at our best. If you're trying more to hit more mainstream media like Fox, a PR firm like Smith is much better. And if you're and if you want to be kind of choose a more inexpensive option that really sells books, like Interview Valet for podcasts. Podcasts are one of the best ways to sell books that we've seen. I won't ever offer that as a service, just because we find it's pretty easy to do on your own. There's not really a need to have experts, but if you want someone to handle it for you, I've only heard great things about them. And that's podcasts we have certainly seen like sells books as good as any other kind of media.
It's shocking to me how well.
Yeah, because
it's out of all the things.
Yeah, there's this level of depth. It's like they get an hour with you. They really get to know you. They know you're smart. They know they're interested, but not quite enough to satisfy that they know everything in the book. And I think podcast listeners are just above average intelligence overall and tend to be readers. That's why Audible is the sponsor of every podcast, because it's people who like to consume books. So the podcasts or general PR, the way we do it, just to be totally transparent, we choose 20 books that speak to the same audience and that would be kind of overlapping and competitive. We find the 50 most shared articles that have been written on those 20 books to find like who wrote about these books, that they were happy they wrote about it and they reached an audience that really cared. And then we've got that database of 1,000 journalists who have covered the book or anyone who's written about the book in any way. And then we have a campaign where we reach out to them. We send them physical copies with a media kit that breaks down, like, here are the best angles in the book for you to cover. Here are some resources to make that easy for you. And we follow up on all those. And the goal is, over the course of the 3 month period or so, that we're securing a huge burst of media attention that's all really, really relevant. So that's one path, is whatever the direction is, get attention quickly for the book to sell copies. The other path is, if the book's more about building your personal brand, I recommend something more like Influence & Co. That's the slow and steady, consistent building up of your reputation by writing articles on your own LinkedIn, contributing them other places, all of those things. That's like the best long-term strategy. And for some people, I would say, like, if you're really trying to build up a brand and this is important to you, I would do both of those things. Like, the ultimate package would be do a great book, publish it, spend 3 months doing a huge media push, and then spend a year after the book comes out consistently releasing content, contributing to new places, getting in front of those audiences slow and steady over time. And that you do that, you're set up for a lot of success.
Yeah, no, it makes me want to go back and
you got 4 more years, man.
Yeah, I got 4 more years. So I am still like, I have thought leaders sending out books to their either best clients or buddies of theirs. Cause it's, I really do feel like it's one of those things where those types of things where you're getting into influencers and their tribes and, the podcast, even a mid-level podcast sold me more books than being on national Fox News.
Crazy. Yeah.
And people would be, it sounds cool to be in the media room, the green room, being on TV, sharing it. But at the end of the day, like, what actually sells books and gets you traction, and what's just like a flash in the pan, cool to, I can check that box. Like, I was on Fox News. Mm-hmm. The whole podcast and kind of the digital media thing is super powerful. Yeah. So, I mean, we're coming up on, almost an hour here. Do we want to open it up for questions? I mean, we've covered, I think, most people's questions, but I don't know if there's others that have popped up.
We don't have any yet, but if anyone listening has any questions, and feel free to be as specific as possible about what you're thinking, what's holding you back with writing, publishing, marketing, anything around those topics. You can just type it into the Q&A below, and we'll have it pop up and we can answer those questions.
Cool.
John, I wanted to ask you, just to jump in quickly, because we kind of skimmed over it. You talked about that you had your own ROI calculation when you were deciding about whether to do this. How did you go through that process? Like, what was the math like on your end?
Yeah, so all in with the fee to help kind of execute the book with Book in a Box, and then our PR, our marketing, our influence and company, our landing pages, websites, all in. We're probably, and we buying the books, our first round of books, our VIP books, which we spent like $200 a copy for like the first 50 that were handmade. All in, we were like $60,000, and so we were looking at from speaking fee increase and book sales, like not just deal flow, because deal flow you could say like could come from anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so just from the increase in speaking fees and opportunities there and actual book sales, we paid for it within the first 3 months.
But how did you do that calculation beforehand?
I mean, we did. I mean, we just basically went in and said we had a budget of 50 to 60,000 that we were willing to kind of put in all into book launch, buying the books, writing the book, PR and everything. And so we thought, hey, we're going to sell, X number of copies over the course of the year, and maybe our speaking fee, like I doubled the speaking fee not too long before that, from like 3,500 to 7,500. Wow. And so we were like, are we sure if this is going to, are people still going to book us? Like I at a core level, like I'm more of an introvert. And so the idea of speaking a ton always kind of was like scary as all get out for me, but the message was resonating. And so with the book launch, we said, we're going to raise our speaking fee. And so we kind of looked at speaking engagements we got from the book, or you could tell like when somebody would get the book or find out about the book and then you get the speaking fee, like we tied it to that versus somebody that was going to book us anyway. Right. But the increase we counted. Yeah. And so we just did the basic math that way. And it, maybe we're off by a couple grand either way, but in general, within that first 3.5 months, we had paid for the book with just those two numbers.
Amazing. It looks like we don't have any questions coming in. So if anyone wants, if other things come up afterwards, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm at zach@bookinabox.com. And if you want to have a more in-depth conversation about either a book that you want to write on your own that you just want some feedback on, or what working with us is like, feel free to just shoot me an email and we can catch up and chat on that. And I've got the link just below that says learn more about Book in a Box to take you to our site, which is full of all the details in the process, the free book, the case studies, and all that kind of stuff. So thanks for tuning in, guys. It's been fun, and look forward to chatting with some of you soon.
Zach, thanks for giving your time, man. This has been great, and kind of even renewed some interest on some of the things I committed to doing that I need to make sure I'm following up on. So everybody have a great rest of your week.
Take care, guys.